Gabriel had always figured that if he was going to die, it would probably involve his cargo hauler exploding in some spectacularly stupid way. Maybe a reactor leak while he was eating a sandwich, or perhaps getting sucked into a black hole because he'd been too cheap to update his navigation charts. Before we begin, YouTube shows me that 93% of you haven't subscribed yet. Subscribing is free, it really supports our community, and I'd love for you to be part of it. Also, drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from. What he hadn't expected was to be dragged through the gleaming corridors of Nexus Prime in energy shackles, flanked by guards who looked like they'd stepped out of a particularly violent nature documentary. "You know," he said to the nearest guard, a 7-foot-tall creature that resembled a cross between a rhinoceros and a filing cabinet. "When I woke up this morning, Galactic War Crimes Tribunal wasn't really on my agenda. I had plans, important plans, like fixing my coffee maker." The guard, Captain Hutrecht, according to his bioluminescent name tag, didn't respond. Apparently, sarcasm didn't translate well into hegemony grunts. The main courtroom of Nexus Prime was the kind of place that made you feel simultaneously insignificant and overly important. Massive crystalline walls stretched upward into infinity, covered in flowing script that hurt to look at directly. Representatives from 6 different species sat in a semicircle that could have housed a small city, their various appendages, tentacles, and energy fields creating a light show that would have been beautiful if it weren't so clearly designed to intimidate. Judge Magistrate Qualmoth presided from the center, a being that looked like someone had taken a jellyfish, given it a law degree, and taught it to hover menacingly. The translator in Gabriel's ear crackled to life as the creature's membrane mouth moved in patterns that definitely weren't meant for human vocal cords. Gabriel of Earth Colony Designation. Qualmoth paused, consulting what appeared to be a holographic legal pad. Cargo hauler license number. Actually, you know what? None of that matters anymore. "Well, that's reassuring," Gabriel muttered. "Should I be worried that my professional credentials are suddenly irrelevant?" "You should be worried about a great many things," interjected Ambassador Luxara from the Luminari delegation. She was beautiful in the way that cut crystal is beautiful. Sharp, precise, and probably capable of slicing through bone if you got too close. Her voice resonated with harmonics that made Gabriel's teeth ache. "The scanner readings from your medical examination on Haven's Edge have created concerns." Gabriel blinked. "My medical exam? You mean that thing where the robot stuck a bunch of needles in me and told me to cut back on synthetic coffee? That medical exam?" "That medical exam," confirmed Qualmoth, "during which our most advanced bioanalytical systems detected something that should not exist." A holographic display materialized in the center of the courtroom, showing what looked like Gabriel's skeleton outlined in blue light. Except for one small detail, everything was pulsing with a deep, angry red that seemed to crawl across his bones like living fire. "The scanner," Qualmoth continued with the kind of dramatic pause that suggested they'd been practicing this speech, flashed red across his bones, declaring, "Bearer of the Extinction mark." The courtroom erupted into chaos. Hive speaker Zakthi, who looked like a praying mantis that had been hitting the gym, began clicking rapidly in what Gabriel's translator helpfully informed him were expletives of extreme concern. Flow current aquinin started bubbling in their environmental suit with what might have been panic or possibly just Tuesday afternoon excitement. It was hard to tell with aquatic species. Energy Weaver Voltum, who existed as a controlled lightning storm inside a containment field, began crackling with increased intensity. Root Elder Growin's bark-like skin shifted from a pleasant brown to a sickly yellow-green that probably meant "oh shit" in plant language. "The what now?" Gabriel asked, raising his voice over the alien cacophony. "The extinction mark? Is that like a frequent flyer program for apocalypses?" "It is," Dr. Nalvek said, rising from her position in the scientific advisory section. "The mark that appears on beings destined to bring about the end of civilizations." She was humanoid enough to be unsettling. 2 arms, 2 legs, a head in roughly the right place. But her skin had the texture of polished metal, and her eyes were solid black. It has appeared only 6 times in recorded galactic history. Each time, entire sectors have gone dark. Gabriel stared at the display showing his glowing skeleton. "Okay, so let me get this straight. You're telling me that this mark, which I didn't know I had, by the way, means I'm some kind of cosmic harbinger of doom?" "Not some kind," Kalmoth said gravely. "The kind." The archives of the hegemony contain records spanning 2 million years. Every being who has carried the extinction mark has been found at the center of dead worlds, surrounded by the empty shells of what were once thriving civilizations. "And now," Luxara added, with what might have been professional satisfaction, "you have appeared in our space." Gabriel looked around the courtroom, taking in the sea of alien faces that ranged from merely unfriendly to actively hostile. "You know, I'm starting to think that routine medical check was a mistake. I should have just stuck with the black market doctors. They never find anything more interesting than space herpes." "This is not a matter for humor," rumbled Root Elder Growin, his voice like wind through ancient forests. "The extinction mark is not a curse that can be laughed away." "Right, because in my experience, taking things super seriously always makes them better," Gabriel replied. "Look, I hate to break it to you all, but I'm pretty sure there's been some kind of mix-up. I haul fertilizer between colonies. My most dangerous cargo is usually expired protein paste. I once spent 3 days arguing with a customs official about the proper classification of synthetic chicken feed." "Nevertheless," Kalmoth declared, raising several tentacle-like appendages for silence, "the mark is clear. The readings are unmistakable. And the historical precedent is concerning." Dr. Nalvek activated another holographic display, this one showing a series of star charts marked with expanding zones of dead space. The pattern is always the same. The bearer appears in a populated region. Within a standard cycle, worlds begin going silent. Communication ceases. Ships that venture into the affected areas never return. "And when we finally investigate," added Captain Hutrek, speaking for the first time with a voice like grinding stone, "we find nothing. No life. No structures. No evidence that civilizations ever existed there at all." Gabriel studied the charts, noting the way the dead zones expanded outward in rough circles from central points. "So you're saying that wherever this mark shows up, everything dies?" "Not dies," Dr. Nalvek corrected. "Ceases. As if it were simply edited out of existence." "Well, that's wonderfully specific, and not at all terrifying." Gabriel gestured at himself with his shackled hands. "But here's the thing I don't get. If everyone who carries this mark is found at the center of dead worlds, how exactly do you have records of them? I mean, if they're destroying civilizations, who's left to write the reports?" The courtroom fell silent. It was the kind of silence that suggested Gabriel had just asked a question that nobody had bothered to consider. Dr. Nalvek's metallic features shifted into what might have been a frown. The records are fragmentary, transmitted before the final silence. or recovered from automated systems in the outer regions of affected zones? Uh-huh. Gabriel raised an eyebrow. And in these fragmentary records, did anyone bother to mention whether the bearer was actively destroying things, or just sort of standing there, looking confused while everything went to hell around them? The specifics are unclear, admitted Kolomoth. Right. So what you're telling me is that you've sentenced me to whatever passes for space prison based on a correlation that might not even be causation. Gabriel looked around the room again. You know what? I take it back. This is exactly the kind of Tuesday I should have expected. The Galactic Council cannot take risks with the safety of trillions of beings. Flow current Aquanin bubbled through their translator. If there is even a possibility that you represent an existential threat, then you lock me up and throw away the key, Gabriel finished. Yeah, I get it. Better safe than sorry. Though I have to ask, has anyone considered that maybe, just maybe, these bearers weren't the cause of the extinctions, but the result of them? Or maybe they were trying to stop whatever was actually causing the problem? Irrelevant, declared Energy Weaver Voltum, their electrical field pulsing with dismissive frequencies. The correlation is absolute. You carry the mark. Civilizations end. Therefore, you must be contained. Motion to contain the subject indefinitely in maximum security isolation. Hive speaker Zakthi clicked rapidly. All in favor? 5 appendages, tentacles, and energy fields rose in the alien equivalent of raised hands. Only Dr. Nalvek remained seated, her black eyes fixed on Gabriel with an expression that might have been curiosity. Abstaining? Asked Kolomoth. I would like to study the subject before we seal him away forever, Dr. Nalvek said. The mark's characteristics are unusual. Different from the historical records in subtle but potentially significant ways. Very well, you may have 48 standard hours for your research. After that, the subject will be transferred to Detention Facility Omega-9. Kolomoth's membrane rippled with finality. Court is adjourned. As the guards moved to escort him away, Gabriel caught Dr. Nalvek's eye. She was still staring at him with that unsettling intensity, as if he were a particularly interesting equation that didn't quite add up. Hey, Doc, he called out as the energy shackles began pulling him toward the exit. When you're doing your research, maybe check into something for me. Find out if any of those dead worlds were growing anything interesting before they went dark. You know, agriculture, terraforming, that kind of thing. Why would that matter? Dr. Nalvek asked. Gabriel grinned as the doors began to close behind him. Because I've been hauling fertilizer to a lot of very specific places lately. And now that I think about it, my navigation computer has been making some pretty weird route suggestions. The last thing he saw before the doors sealed was Dr. Nalvek's metallic features shifting into an expression that definitely looked like alarm. As Gabriel was marched through corridors filled with curious alien faces, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was missing something important. Something about the pattern of his cargo runs over the past few months. Something about the way his ship's automated systems had been guiding him to worlds that other haulers seemed to avoid. Something about the fact that, despite carrying an apparently cosmic doom marker in his bones, he felt perfectly fine. In fact, now that he thought about it, he'd been feeling better than fine lately. Stronger, more alert, like his body was preparing for something. The question was, preparing for what? So, he said to Captain Hutrek as they approached what looked like a maximum security elevator, what's the food like in space prison? Please tell me it's better than the synthetic protein paste I've been living on. Captain Hutrecht's rhinoceros features managed to convey pure exasperation. You are possibly the harbinger of galactic extinction, and you're concerned about meal. Quality! Gabriel shrugged as much as the energy shackles would allow. Hey, if I'm going to end civilization, I might as well do it on a full stomach. Gabriel's cell was the kind of place that made you appreciate the simple pleasures in life, like walls that weren't made of energy fields and doors that didn't hum with the promise of immediate vaporization if you touched them wrong. The crystalline chamber was roughly the size of a decent hotel room. If hotels were designed by paranoid aliens who really wanted to make sure their guests couldn't break anything, escape, or apparently even sneeze without triggering 17 different monitoring systems. He'd been sitting on what passed for a bed, a slab of some kind of adaptive material that was neither comfortable nor entirely uncomfortable, for about 6 hours when Dr. Nalvek arrived. She walked through the energy barrier like it wasn't there, which was either very impressive or very concerning, depending on your perspective on prison security. "So," Gabriel said, not bothering to get up, "let me guess. You're here to poke me with more scanners and confirm that I'm definitely going to end the galaxy. Should I strike a dramatic pose? I feel like harbingers of doom should have better dramatic poses." Dr. Nalvek's metallic features shifted into what might have been amusement. "Actually, I'm here because your suggestion about agricultural patterns was illuminating." "Oh, good. I love being illuminating. It's right up there with being apocalyptic on my list of favorite personality traits." Gabriel gestured around the cell. "So, what did you find?" "Let me guess. All those worlds I delivered fertilizer to are now barren wastelands, and it's definitely my fault." "Not exactly." Dr. Nalvek activated a holographic projector, filling the cell with a three-dimensional star chart. "I cross-referenced your cargo delivery records with our database of worlds that have gone silent over the past galactic cycle. The correlation is troubling." Gabriel studied the display, noting the way certain systems were highlighted in different colors. "Okay, so I've been to some places that later went dark. That doesn't necessarily mean I caused it. Maybe I was just unlucky enough to visit worlds that were already doomed." "That's what I thought initially," Dr. Nalvek said, manipulating the hologram to zoom in on specific regions. "But then I looked deeper into the historical records. Every previous bearer of the extinction mark was found in similar circumstances, not actively destroying worlds, but present at the sites of destruction." "Right. So we're back to the correlation versus causation thing. Maybe the mark doesn't make you dangerous. Maybe it shows up on people who survive dangerous things." Gabrielle leaned forward, studying the pattern of highlighted systems. "What kind of dangerous things, exactly?" Dr. Nalvek's black eyes fixed on him with that unsettling intensity again. "Have you ever heard of the Void Plague?" "Catchy name. Sounds like something that would clear out a buffet pretty quickly." "It's not a joke." Dr. Nalvek waved her hand, and the hologram shifted to show ancient star charts covered in expanding zones of absolute darkness. 2 million years ago, something emerged from the space between galaxies. We called it the Void Plague because it seemed to consume not just life, but existence itself. Entire sectors would simply cease, not destroyed, erased, as if they had never been. Gabriel felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cell's temperature control. "And you think this plague thing is connected to the extinction mark?" "I think the mark isn't a harbinger of doom. It's a survivor's scar." Dr. Nalvek manipulated the display again, overlaying new data. "Look at this. biospectral analysis of tissue samples from the previous bearers recovered from automated research stations. The hologram showed cellular structures that looked like they'd been through a war. Damaged, rebuilt, adapted, then rebuilt again in patterns that didn't match any known evolutionary process. "This DNA doesn't look natural," Gabriel said, studying the twisted helical structures. "It looks like it's been edited, repeatedly." "Exactly. And when I compared it to your samples," Dr. Nalvek highlighted a section of the display. "Your cellular structure shows the same patterns, but more advanced, more refined, as if whatever process created these changes has been getting better at it." Gabriel stood up, pacing the small confines of his cell. "So, you're saying that the extinction mark shows up on beings whose DNA has been altered by contact with this void plague thing?" "I'm saying that every bearer we've found has been biologically modified in ways that shouldn't be possible through natural evolution. And you, Gabriel, show the most sophisticated modifications yet detected." "Well, that's just fantastic." Gabriel stopped pacing and turned to face her. "So, what you're telling me is that I've been exposed to some kind of cosmic horror that rewrites DNA, and instead of killing me, it's turned me into— what exactly?" "I don't know yet, but I have a theory." Dr. Nalvek hesitated, as if what she was about to say violated several scientific protocols. "What if the modifications aren't random? What if they're purposeful? What if the void plague doesn't just consume civilizations? What if it also creates defenses against itself?" Gabriel sat back down, hard. "You think I'm some kind of antibody?" "I think you might be part of an immune response that operates on a galactic scale." Dr. Nalvek began pacing now, her excitement overriding her usual scientific caution. "Consider the pattern. The plague emerges from deep space. It begins consuming worlds. Then bearers start appearing, beings with modified genetics who somehow survive contact with the entity. They're always found at sites of destruction, but what if they're not causing it? What if they're fighting it? Then why do all the worlds still end up dead? Because they're losing." Dr. Nalvek stopped pacing and looked directly at him. "Until now." Gabriel blinked. "Come again?" "Your modifications are different, Gabriel. More sophisticated. More complete. What if you're not just another failed immune response? What if you're the successful one?" Before Gabriel could respond, alarms began wailing throughout the station. The lights in his cell flickered from their normal white to a harsh red that hurt to look at. Dr. Nalvek's handheld scanner began beeping frantically. "What's that supposed to mean?" Gabriel asked, though he had a sinking feeling he already knew. Dr. Nalvek's face had gone from metallic gray to a distinctly pale silver. Long-range sensors are detecting massive gravitational distortions approaching from the galactic rim. The signature matches theoretical models for void plague manifestation. "So, let me get this straight," Gabriel said, standing up as the alarms continued to blare. "You just finished explaining that I might be some kind of cosmic antibody designed to fight an ancient evil, and now that ancient evil is coincidentally showing up right outside your space station?" "It's not a coincidence," Dr. Nalvek said grimly. "The plague responds to the presence of active immune responses. Your arrival here has been like sending up a signal flare." Gabriel looked around his crystalline prison as the red emergency lighting made everything look like the inside of a heart. "You know, when I woke up yesterday, the biggest threat to galactic civilization was my potentially expired cargo insurance. Now I'm apparently patient zero for cosmic horror, and the monster's coming to dinner." "This is not the time for sarcasm," Dr. Nalvek said, though her voice shook slightly. "Doctor, when you're potentially the only thing standing between civilization and cosmic annihilation, sarcasm isn't just appropriate, it's practically mandatory." Gabriel grinned, though it felt a little forced. "Besides, look on the bright side. If this void plague thing is really coming, at least we'll find out pretty quickly whether your theory about me being an antibody is right. And if you're not, then I guess the Galactic Council's decision to lock me up was the right one after all. Though, you know, it's probably going to be a pretty hollow victory for them." Dr. Nalvek was studying her scanner readings, her metallic features creased with concentration. "Gabriel, there's something else. Your biometric readings are changing. The extinction mark is responding to something." Gabriel looked down at himself, though he couldn't see anything different. Responding how? "The cellular activity in the affected areas is increasing exponentially. It's like your body is preparing for something." Preparing for what? Before Dr. Nalvek could answer, another alarm joined the cacophony, this one with a distinctly different tone that somehow managed to sound both urgent and hopeless. "Hull breach alert," announced the station's artificial intelligence in multiple languages. "Unknown entity has made contact with outer hull. Defensive systems non-responsive. All personnel report to emergency stations." Gabriel felt something strange happening in his chest. Not pain, exactly, but a sensation like his ribs were rearranging themselves. When he breathed, it felt like his lungs were processing more than just air. "Doctor," he said, his voice sounding different even to himself, "I think your theory about me being an antibody might be about to get field tested." Dr. Nalvek looked at him with an expression that was equal parts fascination and terror. "Gabriel, your eyes. What about them? They're glowing." Gabriel caught his reflection in the crystalline wall of his cell. His eyes, which had been perfectly normal brown that morning, were now lit with the same red radiance that had outlined his skeleton in the courtroom display. "Well," he said, surprised by how calm he sounded, "I guess we're about to find out what happens when an unstoppable force meets an immovable object. Though in this case, I'm not entirely sure which one I am." The lights went out completely, plunging the cell into darkness broken only by the crimson glow emanating from Gabriel's modified genetics. Somewhere in the distance, something that sounded like reality being torn apart began to echo through the station's corridors. "Doctor," Gabriel said into the darkness, "I don't suppose your research turned up any kind of instruction manual for cosmic antibodies, did it?" "I'm afraid not." "Then I guess we're going to have to improvise." Gabriel stood up, feeling strength flowing through his body in ways that definitely hadn't been there that morning. "And doctor? Next time someone shows up with an extinction mark, maybe start with the 'you might be humanity's immune response' theory instead of the 'you're definitely going to end civilization' approach. It's better for morale." The sound of tearing reality was getting closer. The thing about cosmic horror, Gabriel reflected, as reality continued making sounds like a garbage disposal eating a violin, was that it really didn't care about your schedule. He'd been planning to spend the next few hours sitting in his cell, maybe working on his witty comebacks for when the Galactic Council inevitably decided to execute him. Instead, he was watching his prison's energy barriers flicker and die, while something that shouldn't exist gnawed its way through the hull of the most secure space station in the galaxy. "Status report," Dr. Nalivek was saying into her communicator, though the response was mostly static, mixed with what sounded like screaming in several alien languages. "Repeat, this is Dr. Nalvek in Detention Block 9. What is the current situation?" The communicator crackled back with Captain Hutrecht's voice, though it sounded strained. "Doctor, where you are is probably the safest place on the station right now. The outer decks are gone. Not destroyed, gone. Like they never existed." Gabriel watched the energy barrier that had been keeping him imprisoned sputter and fade entirely. "Well, that's convenient timing. Though I have to say, reality is being selectively edited wasn't really on my list of ways to get out of jail." Dr. Nalvek looked at him with those unsettling black eyes. "Gabriel, your cellular activity is off the charts. The extinction mark isn't just glowing, it's spreading." Gabriel looked down at his arms. She was right. The red radiance that had started in his bones was now visible through his skin, forming intricate patterns that looked almost like circuitry. Or maybe like a targeting system. "So either I'm about to explode, or I'm about to do something that's going to make exploding look like a minor inconvenience," Gabriel said. "Any preferences, Doc?" "I think," Dr. Nalvek said carefully, "that your body is activating systems that have been dormant until now. The question is whether you can control them." "Control them? I don't even know what they are." Gabriel flexed his fingers, watching the red patterns pulse along his knuckles. "Though I have to admit, this is probably the coolest thing that's ever happened to me. Even if it kills me, at least I'll go out looking like a special effect." The station shuddered, and Gabriel could hear something that might have been bulkheads collapsing, or might have been the sound of space-time having a nervous breakdown. Through the crystalline walls of his cell, he could see other prisoners in their own energy cages, though some of the cells were simply empty. Not broken open. Empty, as if they'd never contained anything at all. "Doctor," Gabriel said, his voice oddly steady, "I think I need to get to the station's central core." "That's impossible. The core is 12 decks down and through sections that are probably no longer there." "Yeah, about that." Gabriel walked to the edge of where his cell's energy barrier had been and stepped through. Nothing happened. No alarms, no emergency containment, no guards rushing to drag him back. "I don't think normal rules are applying anymore." Dr. Nalvek stared at him. "The security systems should have activated the moment you left the containment field." "Should have, but didn't." Gabriel looked around the detention block, noting the way some corridors seemed to fade into darkness that wasn't quite darkness. "I'm guessing that whatever's eating the station is also eating the infrastructure that was keeping me locked up. Which means—" His words were cut off by a scream that came from everywhere and nowhere, a sound that made his teeth ache and his spine try to relocate itself. It wasn't quite a sound that organic beings could make, and definitely not one that organic beings should hear. "That," Dr. Nalvek said, with admirable scientific detachment, "would be the void plague announcing its presence." "Charming. Does it take requests? Because I'd love to hear its rendition of My Way." Gabriel started walking toward what he hoped was still a corridor leading toward the station's interior. "Come on, Doc. If I'm really some kind of cosmic antibody, then sitting around waiting for the infection to find us probably isn't the optimal strategy." Dr. Nalvek hesitated for a moment, then began following him. "Gabriel, there's something you should know about the core. It's not just the station's central computer. It's also where we store the quantum resonance array that keeps Nexus Prime stable in normal space. And that's important because if the void plague corrupts it, the station won't just be destroyed. It'll be retroactively erased from existence. Every legal decision made here, every peace treaty signed, every scientific discovery recorded, all of it will simply never have happened." Gabriel paused at what had been a security checkpoint, and was now just an archway leading into a corridor that seemed to stretch much farther than the station's blueprints would allow. So, no pressure or anything. Exactly. They walked through sections of the station that couldn't possibly fit inside its original dimensions, past windows that showed views of space that definitely weren't the same space they'd been in an hour ago. Other survivors moved through the corridors like sleepwalkers, aliens from a dozen species, all heading in roughly the same direction, with expressions of barely controlled panic. Gabriel recognized Ambassador Luxara from the tribunal, her crystalline form now flickering with stress fractures. Judge Magistrate Kalmoth floated nearby, his jellyfish-like membrane pulsing with colors that probably indicated judicial distress. Even Captain Hutrek was there, his rhinoceros bulk moving with surprising grace through corridors that kept changing their configuration. The central core, Luxara was saying as they approached, is the only section still maintaining structural integrity. But the approaches are compromised. We've lost contact with the outer rings entirely. Define lost contact, Gabriel said, joining the group. Captain Hutrek turned toward him, and Gabriel noticed that the security officer's eyes had taken on a distinctly haunted quality. They're not destroyed. They're not damaged. They're just not there anymore, like they were edited out of reality. Right. So we're dealing with an entity that can selectively delete parts of existence. Gabriel looked around the group, noting the way they were all instinctively backing away from the darker sections of the corridor. Has anyone considered that maybe we're approaching this wrong? What do you mean? Asked Judge Magistrate Kalmoth, his translated voice carrying harmonics of desperation. I mean, you're all acting like this is something we need to hide from or defend against. But what if it's something we need to engage with? Gabriel gestured at the patterns of light still spreading across his skin. I mean, look at me. I'm obviously changing into something. Maybe instead of trying to get to safety, I should be going toward the threat. That, Dr. Nalvek said quietly, is either brilliant or suicidal. Why not both? Gabriel grinned, though he felt the expression change as it crossed his face. His teeth felt different, sharper. Besides, what's the worst that could happen? I die horribly and take the universe with me? Because honestly, that was already on the table. The corridor ahead of them began to darken, not with the absence of light, but with the presence of something that absorbed more than just photons. The walls started to become translucent, showing views of spaces that hurt to look at directly. It's coming, Luxara whispered, her crystalline form beginning to resonate with fear harmonics that made the air itself vibrate. Gabriel stepped forward toward the approaching darkness. The patterns on his skin flared brighter, and he felt something in his chest click into place, like a key turning in a lock. You know, he said, his voice carrying new harmonics that seemed to make the corridor walls more solid. The thing about humans is that we have this really annoying tendency to laugh at things that want to kill us. It's probably a character flaw. The darkness paused, as if it had been expecting fear or panic, or at least a more respectful acknowledgement of its cosmic significance. I mean, seriously, Gabriel continued, walking forward into the space where reality was becoming negotiable. You're the void plague, the consumer of civilizations, the great darkness between galaxies, and your big strategy is, what? Sneaking around, eating space stations? That's not cosmic horror. That's just poor time management. Behind him, he could hear Dr. Nalvek making small sounds that might have been scientific fascination or might have been hyperventilation. The other aliens had gone completely silent, watching as Gabriel walked toward something that their every instinct told them was the end of everything they had ever known. "Gabriel," Dr. Nalvek called after him, "what are you doing?" "I think," Gabriel replied, his voice echoing strangely in the deteriorating corridor. "I'm about to find out what happens when an extinction-level event meets someone who's really having a bad day." The darkness ahead of him began to take shape, forming into something that looked like hunger given form and malevolent purpose. Gabriel felt the changes in his body accelerating, felt systems coming online that he'd never known he had. "Also," he added, just before the real confrontation began, "I'm pretty sure I'm about to ruin someone's ancient and terrible plan. And honestly, that might be the most human thing I've ever done." The void plague manifested as something that Gabriel's brain kept trying to describe as a giant space squid, except that squids had the courtesy to exist in only 3 dimensions and didn't make reality hiccup just by being present. This thing looked like someone had taken the concept of hunger, given it tentacles, and then taught it to hate mathematics. "So," Gabriel said, walking directly toward it while his skin continued its light show, "you're the big, bad cosmic horror that's been terrorizing the galaxy for millions of years. I have to say, I'm a little disappointed. I was expecting something with better interior decorating skills." The entity responded by reaching out with appendages made of crystallized darkness, touching the walls of the corridor and causing them to simply stop existing. Not destroyed, just edited out of reality like a cosmic typo. "Yeah, see? That's exactly what I'm talking about," Gabriel continued, apparently immune to the fact that he was having a conversation with something that could erase him from existence with a casual gesture. "No style, no panache. You're like the universe's most boring apocalypse." Behind him, Gabriel could hear Dr. Nalvek muttering what sounded like prayers in several languages, some of which probably weren't supposed to exist yet. The other survivors had backed away as far as they could, without actually leaving the station entirely. The void plague surged forward, and Gabriel felt every modified cell in his body respond. The red patterns on his skin flared into brilliant life, forming geometric designs that hurt to look at directly. When the entity's darkness touched the light emanating from his body, something interesting happened. It stopped, not paused, not slowed down. It hit Gabriel's modified biology like a wave hitting a seawall and simply couldn't proceed any further. "Huh," Gabriel said, looking down at himself with genuine surprise. "That's new." The void plague recoiled, its form shifting into configurations that suggested it was having roughly the same reaction Gabriel would have had if his morning coffee had suddenly started arguing with him about quantum mechanics. "You know what your problem is?" Gabriel asked, advancing on the cosmic horror that had just discovered it wasn't quite as omnipotent as advertised. "You've been picking on civilizations that make sense. Logical species, organized cultures, beings that follow rules and have predictable responses to existential threats." The entity lashed out again, this time with something that looked like a whip made of compressed emptiness. Gabriel caught it, with his bare hand. The look of confusion that crossed what passed for the void plague's face would have been hilarious if it hadn't been happening during what was technically the end of the world. "But here's the thing about humans," Gabriel continued, his grip tightening on the impossible whip until it began to dissolve. "We're not logical. We're not predictable. When faced with insurmountable cosmic horror, our first instinct isn't to run screaming or try to negotiate. Our first instinct is to make jokes and see if we can annoy it to death." The void plague pulled back, its form becoming less stable as it encountered something it had never experienced in millions of years of consuming civilizations: complete and utter irreverence. Gabriel felt the changes in his body reaching completion. His bones were no longer just marked with the extinction mark. They were the extinction mark, a living targeting system designed to identify and neutralize threats to galactic stability. His blood carried antibodies that had been refined over countless generations of human exposure to cosmic horror. His brain had been quietly rewritten to process impossible realities without breaking down. "You want to know the really funny part?" Gabriel asked, beginning to glow with light that pushed back against the entity's reality-warping presence. "Earth didn't survive your last visit because we were stronger or smarter than everyone else. We survived because we're too stubborn to know when we're beaten." The Void Plague tried a different approach, attempting to simply erase Gabriel from existence the way it had erased sections of the station. The Cosmic Delete command hit Gabriel's modified genetics and bounced off like a rubber ball hitting a brick wall. "Nope," Gabriel said cheerfully. "Sorry, but I've been vaccinated against that particular form of non-existence." Turns out that when you spend enough time hauling fertilizer made from the remains of dead worlds, you build up an immunity to being retroactively edited out of reality. Behind him, Gabriel could hear Captain Hutrecht making what sounded like religious observations in several languages simultaneously. Ambassador Luxara was resonating with frequencies that probably translated to "this is impossible" in crystalline. The Void Plague was beginning to retreat, its form becoming less coherent as it encountered something that simply refused to follow the rules it had spent eons learning to exploit. Civilizations were supposed to fear it. Beings were supposed to comprehend their insignificance in the face of cosmic horror. They were not supposed to walk up to eldritch entities and critique their performance. "You know what I think happened?" Gabriel asked, pursuing the retreating horror with the casual confidence of someone discussing weekend plans. "I think you're not actually from outside this galaxy. I think you're from inside it, and you've been eating civilizations for so long that you forgot what they tasted like when they fought back." Gabriel's light was expanding now, filling the corridor with radiance that made the walls more solid, that restored deleted sections of the station, that turned possibility back into reality. Where his influence touched the Void Plague's darkness, it didn't destroy it. It transformed it back into normal, boring, non-apocalyptic, empty space. "Here's my theory," Gabriel continued, his voice carrying harmonics that seemed to stabilize quantum fluctuations just by existing. "You're what's left of the first civilization that figured out how to edit reality. You got so good at deleting things that you eventually deleted yourselves, and all that was left was the hunger and the editing tools." The Void Plague's retreat became a full rout as Gabriel's expanding field of normalized reality began converting its essence back into something that followed standard physics. "But humans," Gabriel grinned, and his smile was bright enough to illuminate regions of space that had been dark for millennia. "We're the galaxy's error correction protocol. We're what evolution comes up with when it needs something too stupid to know that cosmic horror is supposed to be scary." The last of the Void Plague dissolved into normal space-time, leaving behind nothing but some confused dark matter and the faint smell of ozone. Gabriel looked around at the restored corridor, at the aliens staring at him with expressions ranging from terror to wonder to what might have been religious awe. "Well," he said, brushing imaginary dust off his hands, "that was fun. Anyone know if the cafeteria is still serving lunch? Fighting cosmic horror really works up an appetite." Judge Magistrate Kolmoth floated forward, his membrane pulsing with colors that probably indicated judicial confusion. "Gabriel of Earth, The Galactic Council would like to offer you a position as Extinction Defense Coordinator. Gabriel considered this for a moment. That sounds like a lot of paperwork. Also, I'd probably have to wear a uniform, and uniforms make me look like I'm trying too hard. He started walking back toward what had been his cell. Thanks, but I think I'll stick with hauling fertilizer. Someone's got to keep the galaxy's gardens growing. But you just saved civilization itself, protested Dr. Nalvek. Gabriel paused and looked back at her. Doc, I hate to break it to you, but saving civilization is what humans do on days ending in Y. It's not special. It's just Tuesday. He resumed walking, whistling something that sounded suspiciously like a victory march. Besides, he called over his shoulder, someone's got to deliver next month's fertilizer shipments. And now that I know what I'm really distributing, I want to make sure it gets to all the right places. The extinction mark still glowed softly beneath his skin, but now it looked less like a warning and more like a promise. As long as humans were around to be inappropriately cheerful in the face of cosmic horror, the galaxy would probably be fine.